Welcome to the Autism in Black podcast, where we focus on all things autism and the Black parent experience. Our goal is to always educate, support, and empower parents to advocate for not only their children, but themselves. Hello, and welcome to the Autism in Black podcast. I'm Maria Davis-Pierre, a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida and America's #1 autism advocate for Black parents. I am the founder and CEO of Autism in Black, Inc., where we aim to include the excluded. Today we have LaDawn Lanier, who is a graduate of Temple University's School Psychology program, as well as a graduate of Widener University's Human Sexuality program. She has been incorporating her experience in this field into her practice, providing psychological services for a multicultural population and their families. As a full-time school psychologist for over 20 years, LaDawn has provided a number of professional development opportunities, staff consultations, individual group counseling, and psychoeducational led groups. I'm really excited at having LaDawn on the show to talk about sex education in the schools, as well as the gaps that parents need to be filling and having the conversations with their children. So I hope you enjoy today's show. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast. This is a very special episode, and I'm so excited to have today's guest on the show to talk to us parents about a very important topic. Today, we have LaDawn on the show, and I'm very excited. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good, actually. Pretty good. I'm happy that I am. Good to be healthy.
I can completely understand. So at this point, I've already read your bio to our audience, but can you tell us more about who you are?
Well, I am a Black mama, originally from Brooklyn. A Black mama from Brooklyn with some Southern roots. My mama's family's originally from Alabama. So occasionally you'll hear a Southern accent come out, and I don't know where it comes from because I've grown up in the North my entire life. I'm an educator first, a parent second. I love all things children. Mm-hmm. I'm a proud parent of a beautiful 2-year-old who unfortunately has been driving me up a wall. Acting like she's 2.
I can understand that. So, our topic is sex education, and mostly when we hear that phrase, we think about the mechanics of sex. But I know it's so much more. But for our audience, can you explain exactly what sex education is?
Well, see, asking what sex education is really a loaded question. Because I can tell you what it is for many people, mm-hmm. and I can also tell you what I believe it should be.
Oh, well, I want to hear both.
So what it is, unfortunately, for a lot of people, is don't do that. Just don't do that. Don't ask about it. Don't talk about it. It won't happen. Let's pretend that it never happened or it never will happen. And if it does happen, it can only happen in this way. That way is allowed. No other way is allowed. So unfortunately, that's what it looks like for a lot of people. What it should look like is a conversation that begins kind of at birth. You don't start talking about a child's sexuality once they're already an adult. Mm-hmm. Sexuality isn't just, intercourse. That's all people want to talk about. Sexuality isn't just intercourse. It's human development. So you're talking about reproduction. You're talking about puberty. You're talking about orientation, your gender identity. You're talking about relationships, personal skills, how to communicate and negotiate for what you want, decision making. Yeah. Sexual health, like there's diversity, what you see in the media, all of that is sexuality. So sex education should really look like something that's a little bit more scientifically based, not just we're talking off the top of our heads, but there's some research involved in it. And you should be exploring your values and beliefs about different topics and trying to gain the skills that are needed for you to navigate in your life.
That is a great definition. And I know for us in our household, we are all about raising or creating a sex positive environment for our children. And a lot of people look at me strange when I say that, like, because my kids are, 4 and 7, and like, you're already, having these conversations. I'm like, yes, there are certain conversations. Exactly. There's certain conversations that we should be having that are age appropriate. And one that I think goes over parents' head a lot, but we need to especially talk about in the climate that we're in, is boundary setting and consent. Can you talk about, that, and one, how we talk to our children who are autistic about boundary setting and consent?
So let me tell you a really short story about something that actually happened a couple of days ago. Mm-hmm. I have a 2-year-old. At this point, she appears to be pretty typically developing. We'll see what time tells, but right now she appears to be pretty typically developing. And, when you have children, you don't know what you're going to get. You're just going to hope that you're going to get someone that's healthy, and you're going to move forward with whatever happens. Mm-hmm. So I'm outside playing in the yard because that's the only place we really can go. And she's doing some really cute things, and I wanted to take some pictures. This girl runs across the yard with her hand out. No, don't take my picture. And I immediately stopped. And I realized that I'm always telling everybody else that we should allow our children to establish boundaries. And here I am filming every single thing that she does, not thinking that maybe she doesn't want to be filmed. So, we have to take that into account when we're trying to teach boundaries. We also have to respect those boundaries.
Yes.
You can't just talk about it. You have to be about it too. And it's really difficult to explain to any child of any age that there are times where even when I'm teaching you that it's okay for you not to be touched or not to be talked to, there are going to be situations that I'm going to have to put you in where somebody really does have to touch you. Like, for example, going to a doctor's office. Mm-hmm. My pediatrician is amazing. At that office, they constantly ask, can I touch you? Is it okay if I do this? Even to my 2-year-old. You have to normalize asking, is it okay if I touch you here? Yeah. Is it okay not to be touched? Can I do this in this way? Is it okay if maybe mom or dad holds your hand while I do this? Even with shots, it makes the world a lot safer if you're having that conversation all along.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the instance of going to the doctor and, they have to have the shots, or the doctor has to, touch them, and the doctor is asking and they say no, how do you explain that to them in that situation? It's different.
Unfortunately, that's a conversation that you're going to have before you get to the doctor's office. Okay. because that's going to be really awkward when you get there and the kid is like, no, I'm not having that today. So, unfortunately, there are going to be times where you have to go through something that's not going to be comfortable. Mm-hmm. You let your child know that you're going to be there with them the entire time. And if you have to talk about it afterwards, then okay, we have to talk about it afterwards. But there are things that you have to go through in order to make sure that you're healthy and that you stay healthy and that the people around you can remain healthy. And this is just part of life, but we have to normalize that certain things in life might not always feel comfortable, but we have to go through them. Mm. And it's not an easy conversation to have with any child, especially, if we know it's going to hurt. Who wants to tell their child that the shot is not going to hurt and that it does hurt? Exactly. Shots hurt. They do. That's just realistic, but the pain is going to go away.
I like
and that's really what you have to explain to them. The pain, sometimes things do hurt, and the pain will go away, and you're going to be there to support them with how they feel about it and anytime they want to talk about it.
So providing them with a safe space,
Yeah.
to process those things. And I like how you said, we let others in our family, our friends know, boundaries for our children, but we have to respect them as well. And that is something that, even I do with my children. I ask them, can mommy have a kiss? Can mommy have a hug? And most parents will just give me a kiss or give me a hug or take it. But, we have to show them as well that we're respecting their boundaries as well.
Right. And I think as a community, we sometimes think it's disrespectful to not to go hug auntie or not to go hug uncle or whomever. My parents were the first people to tell me it's okay just to say hello. You can say hi. You don't have to hug and kiss everybody, but not everybody else understands that. And guess what? They don't have to. That's not their child. Yeah. This is your child. Yeah. You have to protect your child and protect your child's boundaries. So if somebody else doesn't understand that your child doesn't want to be hugged or kissed or touched, then that's a conversation for the adults to have, not for you to have to put on that child to process.
Yes, I completely agree. We set those boundaries, with the people that are, around us, and let them know that, one, you have to ask. And if they say no, you have to respect that, especially with a child who has sensory, related things, they don't want to be touched or hugged sometimes. So you have to respect that, and feeling like, oh my gosh, that is so disrespectful, especially in the Black community. We have to, get over some of those things because, it's a new time, a new era.
We have a lot more information now than we had in years past about a lot of different things. So it's okay to learn something new and be different.
Yes, and respect it. A lot of times we don't respect children as if they're not people to respect. And I'm like, no, they deserve to have respect as well.
It's almost like we grew up in a time where children are seen and not heard, and then then you expect them to have a voice later on, but you never actually let them practice having a voice.
Oh, you preaching today. You are preaching today.
Hey, I was one of those kids who wasn't allowed to have a voice, and when I got one, I made sure I was heard.
Look, listen, okay. I'm the loudest one, but my parents did allow me to have a voice in certain situations.
Right.
So I did learn a lot, and with my children, it's like, okay, now I'm even more so like, okay, you got to learn, how to be a voice for yourself as well, and it's a hard thing to do because you want to swoop in and be like, I got this, but sometimes you got to let them do what they need to do.
You at times you'll be surprised at how well they swoop in and fix their own issues. If we just give them the opportunity to, because if you think about it, they're watching us the entire time. We've been practicing all the things that we want them to do all along, and at some point all we have to do is step back and let them do it. We just have to trust that we have to trust our own teaching. And I think a lot of times we're so afraid that our children are going to get hurt, we don't step back and let them just do what they need to do.
Yes, especially when you have a child who has a disability and you're so used to being that voice, and you don't want them to be bullied or being taken advantage of, or people not respecting their boundaries, that it's, hard sometimes to be like, okay, you go and advocate for yourself in these situations. So it is like a fine line that a parent has to navigate and balance, teaching and as well as also helping them use their voice.
I feel like we should provide like a script for almost everything that we do with children. And
that would be helpful, especially in these kind of conversation.
It really is. I mean, think about it. When you're doing an interview, you have your notes. Why not give them notes for life, And especially for kids who learn better through a lot of repetition. You know, they learn better by modeling those behaviors. They learn better by doing them over and over. You can just practice all day long when you need to. And then at some point, they're going to have the opportunity to try it. And if it doesn't work, then we change the script and try something different.
Yes, that is a good point, especially when we're talking about friendships and relationships and navigating that whole realm, because that's a part of, a sex education topic too, is, navigating friendships and relationships. And it can get tricky for us as neurotypical adults. It's, a murky, messy situation at times. So trying to have these conversations with our kids, it's difficult of, is this person taking advantage of you? Is this person truly your friend? Those kind of conversations. So what goes into having those types of conversations with our children?
Well, honestly, you have to kind of define what a relationship looks like very differently now than, when we were little kids. Because the world is very different now. We have so much exposure and connection to a world that people didn't have. I think about the kids that I see every day at work, and they've never lived in a world without personal computers. Many of them walk around with stronger computers than people have it in their homes, on their cell phones. My computer, when I was in school, taught me how to go from point A to point B and draw a straight line. And we thought we were doing something amazing. So imagine the access that they have to learn all about relationships. And not all of these relationships are going to be good relationships. So first we need to talk about, what a good relationship looks like and what it doesn't look like. But not minimizing that social media is out there and people do form friendships with individuals they may never meet face to face, but that doesn't mean it's not a real friendship. I think that's something that a lot of people have trouble navigating, because I think the first inclination is to say, well, if you've never met these people face to face, they're not really your friends. In reality, a lot of people online date, and if they're not online dating, they may meet people in a Facebook group or a chat room or something, and they're lifelong communicators. That's what a friendship looks like. So if this is what friendships look like for them, then we need to define whether or not the friendship is one that's mutually beneficial. Is everyone being honest in that friendship? Are you being safe in that friendship? Are the people being respectful in that friendship? Because all an intimate relationship is a friendship that's gone a little bit further.
Yes.
Everything should start with, every relationship should start with you being a friend, and it'll evolve into whatever it's going to involve it.
I like that. And, that helps get the conversation started, starting off there. And like you were saying, we're in different times. There's so many categorizations of what a relationship is, like, oh, we're just talking, or we're this, or we're that. And it gets confusing. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Right. And it's important for us. Yeah, it's important for us to know what they're talking about. They have slang that's regional. They have slang that's local. And they have slang that everybody in the country might use. We don't have a clue what they're talking about because we're not using that language. They could be dating somebody for 2 days and the relationship is over, and we're thinking, but it didn't start yet. I don't get it. Because we don't speak the same language they're speaking.
And that is true. But, by cultivating that safe space and having these conversations early on with them, you've kind of opened the door for them to be able to talk to you about these certain things later down the line, which is important, especially when they hit adolescence age and they're exposed to, like you were saying, social media and the internet, because you're able to Google anything and it's going to pop up for you.
And not all of it is going to be good. Exactly. Not all of it's going to be accurate. Not all of it's going to be safe.
So how do we teach our children to navigate the internet and social media safely?
Well, first, I'm going to say that I might surprise you. I am a firm believer in parental controls. you should. I grew up in a house that didn't have doors for the bedroom. I am not going to do that with my child. My child will have a door. Mm-hmm. But that being said, I'm still going to monitor what's going on in that room. Mm-hmm. So if you have parental controls that you can place on the social media, on your cable, or on the phone providers, I would recommend that. And even then, you still have to monitor what they're experiencing. Mm-hmm. I have what is it called? It's called YouTube Kids. Mm-hmm. So to make sure that if my daughter is watching an educational video while I'm trying to get some work done, that it really is an educational video. There still is no guarantee then that everything is exactly what it's supposed to be. Yeah. So you have to constantly monitor and then double check your own monitoring to make sure that they're not gaining access to information that's not developmentally appropriate. Mm-hmm. You know, because we're assuming that these kids are a little bit older and they're interested in sex. There are kids that are being exposed at much younger ages now, and it's not appropriate. And unfortunately, if we're not monitoring well enough, they're going to have more exposure to things that we're going to have more intense conversations about. Mm-hmm. So control as much as you can without being overbearing, and make sure that you have an open line of communication where you can talk about, you know, different things they may see and how they feel about it and what it means to them. You know, children often ask questions and we think the worst of the how are we going to come up with the answer to this question? And it's not usually what they're actually asking, you know, so it's okay to push back a little bit and say, well, what do you think it is? Mm. Find out what they think it is, and that'll guide where you go with the conversation. You know, you don't want to give information that they're not looking for, because then you're going to have a conversation you're not ready for.
Exactly. And I think, you know, a lot of parents are fearful to have these conversations with their kids, you know, because, you know, for them it's awkward and like, how am I going to talk to my child about these things? Mm-hmm. But, you know, with social media and the internet, if you're not doing it, they're going to find out the wrong things.
Exactly. There are a lot of great websites out there, and, you know, computer apps, phone apps that will give you scientific information that's developmentally appropriate. And as parents, I think we need to check some of those out. And if that means that you're going to offer, if you don't have the answer, that you're not comfortable talking about it, and the way to connect with your child is to offer an app where they can ask the question and you know it's going to be answered by someone who is trained to do this, then by all means, I suggest that you do it. I can't make every parent in the world comfortable having every conversation, because as a parent, I'm not comfortable having every conversation, and I'm trained to do this. That doesn't mean I can do it all the time and with everybody. It may look different when it comes time for that 2-year-old to be a little older and start asking questions.
That is a good point. And I know one of my favorite websites is, I think it's Sex Positive Families. They have a lot of great resources, books for every age, trainings. There's so much on there that you can, you know, get. I just ordered a couple books off of there about boundaries and consent. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they have so many resources that you can check out. And like you were saying, the apps that are out there that can help these conversation starters with your children. You know, there's so much we can do, because it's important to have the conversation rather than not have the conversation. So one thing I know that you do is you work in the school setting with teaching sex education to autistic students.
Right. So my primary job is as a school psychologist. And in most places, all your school psychologist really does is do a lot of testing. We do a lot of diagnosis, but we're trained to do a lot more than that. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times when there are questions of sexuality that come up, they go to, you know, teachers go to the person in the building that they think might know the best about, you know, whatever the issue is. So they're going to the counselors and they're going to their school psychologist. I just happen to be a school psychologist who also has a degree in human sexuality, and I'm interested in providing more instruction where instruction is needed. So we do a lot of, I want to say small group instruction, it's almost like having like a lunch group where we will sit down and we'll talk about whatever things come up. And we get a lot of interesting conversations about dating, because dating has changed a lot. and I think a lot of times we forget that if the kid that we're working with isn't neurotypical, that doesn't mean that somehow puberty didn't hit in the same way it did for everybody else.
Yes, that is.
Puberty comes, it comes regardless of your IQ. It comes regardless of what other physical ailments you may have. It comes regardless of your religion. Puberty is coming.
Yes.
And, there are people who may never develop an attraction to another person, but the majority of individuals do. And you have to talk about that because they have to navigate that. That's part of their everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic. They're also dealing with the friend that they've had since the third grade suddenly looking really cute to them. And they don't know how to express that.
Or what that feeling is.
Right. Like, what does this mean? Does that, what if they don't like me? What if they do like me? Does this mean I like them?
Mm-hmm. I know I was reading an article, and it was saying that 84% of individuals with moderate to severe intellectual disabilities in the U.S. do not receive no sex education at all. And that was just mind-blowing to me, because I think one thing that is just my opinion is that people are thinking that these individuals do not want to have relationships, don't want to have sex, so because of their disability, so they just don't bother having the conversation with them.
Right. I've gotten into a lot of conversations with educators about how to deal with these type of questions when they come up in class, mm-hmm. because they definitely come up. And a lot of times the educators are just uncomfortable having the conversation with me because they can't believe that that kids are sexual. Mm. Not just that kids are sexual, but this child with this label or this exceptionality can also be sexual. Mm. And I have to let them know that our children are born sexual beings.
Yes.
This is how they were born. We were born and we connect with other people. It's all energy being connected. So if we were connecting with you as infants, why would you think that they wouldn't continue to connect with people and that connection wouldn't evolve?
Mm-hmm. That is a great point. And I know me and you had a conversation a couple months back, and you were telling me that usually schools don't even include those who are in those autism clusters in the school setting in the actual sex education classes that they offer.
Right. Well, important thing to know, there are only 29 states and Washington, D.C. that even mandate sex education.
Okay.
Only 29 states. And there is no guarantee that it's going to be high quality or it's even going to cover what the students need. Mm. So if you're not in those 29 states, who knows what you're going to get? Mm. Most of the sex ed laws are decided by state and local legislations. So for instance, in my state, I'm in Pennsylvania, we might not be one of the 29 states, but locally, my school district does provide something. So there can be a local decision if your state isn't one of those places that requires it. But even then, only 15 of the states require instruction to be medically accurate.
Oh, wow.
So when I think about these numbers, only 18 states require info about birth control.
So I want to go back to this 15% only require medically accurate info.
Medically accurate. You have states that don't even, that actually prohibit any discussion or even answering questions about LGBTQ identities. Oh. It is prohibited. Mm. That's like something to pause on. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know what you're going to get. So if this is the entire population, think about the kids that are already marginalized for a number of reasons. So you have kids that may be marginalized because they're in poorer districts, so they have less resources. You have kids that are being marginalized because they are, they have various disabilities. You have kids that are already, because of their level of functioning, are already being separated. And I'm not saying it's right to separate them or wrong to separate them, but they're already being categorized and placed in certain types of classes to educate them better. But no one is taking sexual health into any of this when they're thinking about that, because we don't look for disabilities in sexual health. We're looking for, are you neurotypical? We're looking for, are you intellectually disabled? Are you emotionally disturbed? Are you have some type of learning disability? We're not thinking about sexual health at all. So when we categorize someone, we place them in whatever appropriate educational placement they need to be in. Sometimes you can't really roster those kids into a class that you may not actually have. The class has to exist, first of all.
Yeah, I'm still over here, mind blown on this 15%.
The class has to exist. So let's assume, best case scenario, the class does exist. The class does exist, and you're in one of those wonderful places where it's medically accurate. You still have to have space in your roster. We'll speak in terms of high school. You have to have space in your roster where whatever you need to graduate can actually be put on there. So if you're a student that has classes in a regular curriculum where you're taking 4 Englishes and 4 maths and language and all of that, then yeah, you'll be rostered to a health class if it's there. But if that's not what your roster looks like, and so in Pennsylvania, we might have students that are rostered into autistic support, their entire day might be just amongst students that have similar disabilities, and possibly some other students for like prep periods, but health is not necessarily a prep period that they have.
Wow. And why do you think that is?
Talking about sex is taboo. Even when you're supposed to be talking about it, it's taboo. And it's even more taboo if you're talking about children and sex, because remember, children are not sexual beings. And a child that's differently abled also being a sexual being, oh no. What are we doing here?
So it's as if schools, are missing the mark, and there's a gap that needs to be filled.
Unfortunately, in public education nowadays, there are a lot of gaps that need to be filled.
Yeah.
And when it comes to funding, there are bigger holes to fill with less money. And there are some things that you have to address first. And I understand that. But there has to be some funding coming from somewhere to address the other gaping holes too. Yeah. And I think as parents, we also need to advocate for some of those in our local districts, for some of those holes to be filled, because the money isn't coming from, federal funding. It's coming from your tax money. Yeah. Advocate for what you want your children to have.
Yes. And what is usually taught in these? So let's say that we are, in this 15%, we're getting this medically accurate, information, and we have it on our roster. What is usually taught in the class?
You are going to get everything health related. Okay. Because you're not taking a sex ed class. You're taking a health class or something that's going to be related to health. So you're going to learn about healthy eating. You're going to learn about body image, stuff that does fall under sexuality, but it's not just sexuality. You're going to talk about exercise, and there might be a curriculum for it where It may not be specific lesson plans, but you're supposed to cover these particular units.
Mm-hmm.
And there are going to be a lot of units, for that one semester that you're going to get in high school. There are going to be a lot of units that need to be covered. And how intense those units are is going to be real dependent upon who's actually doing the instruction.
Wow. And we know by the time they're in high school that they've been exposed to.
Right. At that point, it's already too late. We should have been doing this long before that.
Yeah.
But better late than never,
Mm-hmm.
but it should have already happened.
Yeah. So there's a lot of gaps that parents have to think about and then have these conversations with their children, especially if they're not covering the LGBTQ conversations.
Mm-hmm. They're not talking about that. A lot of places are not talking about birth control. A lot of places are not talking about STIs, HIV. They don't talk enough about consent.
Mm.
And like I said, whatever you're going to get, whatever that person that's instructing is comfortable talking about. I've seen some great instruction, and I've seen some pretty bad instruction with the same exact curriculum.
Wow.
But that's what happens with anything, which is why you can't really, you can't rely on the public school system to give your child everything in the way that you want them to have it. If you want your child's education to be more robust, then you need to feed them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a good point.
Mm-hmm. We're entitled to a free and appropriate public education.
And that word appropriate is the key that I always point out to parents. We're not talking about the best of the best.
No, realistically, the best is what you pay for. But guess what? For most people, your taxes are paying for this. So you need to demand the best.
Mm-hmm.
If you can demand it, there are a lot of places where there's a lot of your tax money that goes toward those educational systems, and your K-12 education for a public school is amazing. And then there are places that don't have a funding source. There's no formula for the state, and you kind of get what you get.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not okay. There needs to be more equity, and the only way to get equity is if we're fighting for equity. It doesn't just come magically. It's not going to trickle from the sky. We can't wait for it to fall. It's not manna from the gods. We have to fight for it.
Yeah, and we also have to have these conversations with our children, because unfortunately these things are not going to change overnight. So it's going to be up to us to fill in those gaps and have these conversations, because they are being exposed to a lot, and they might be feeling a lot of things and they don't know how to have these conversations, right. So by, starting these conversations at, age appropriate times, it sets your child up for better success, as I like to say.
Yes, definitely.
So what are some resources parents can look to? We talked about the sex positive families, but what are some apps out there that they can go to, or, other websites or books, that you recommend?
So I know not everyone is a lover of Planned Parenthood, but Planned Parenthood really does have some really good consent videos on their website. Amongst they have other resources as well, but their consent videos are actually they're pretty good. Tolerance.org is another really nice website. Let's see. I feel like I can give you like a whole bunch that you can add to your to your website at some point. There's an app called ROO, ROO. Okay. And it's actually run by Planned Parenthood. So you can ask questions on there anonymously, and it provides fact-checked, like actual scientific responses to the questions that's being asked. And it caters to all age groups that ranging from like puberty through adulthood. So even adults can go on there and ask questions, and there'll be someone on there that can answer the question in an age appropriate way. You set up like an account. So it's not just a random person saying they're 35 asking a question, They gear it towards the age that you say that you are. So you can set that up for your child too.
Oh, that is a great resource to have. And where can the people listening find you and get in contact with you on social media or any website or anything you have going on?
So for now, you can just find me on social media. On Instagram, I am sexologist_Lala. SEXOLOGIST_LALA. And I'll make sure you have that to put it in your.
Yes, all of this will be in our show notes.
And then also on Facebook, Lanier Educational Consulting. I have a page, so you can check me out there. Inbox me, ask me questions, see if I can help you find resources, see if I can be your resource.
Yes, and remember, she is a school psychologist as well as someone who has a background in human sexuality, as well as doing this with the autism clusters in the school. So she is a wealth of knowledge, and I would definitely reach out for questions and resources because she probably is going to have the answer or know where you can go to get the answer.
Definitely. This is 20 years of this one.
I just want to thank you for being on our show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and hopefully we can get you back on to talk about the actual school psychology part of education and what that entails.
Oh, I'd love to be back. Whenever you're ready, I'm ready.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening in to our episode, and we will see you on the next episode of the podcast. Have a good one. If you haven't done so, make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can always be notified when a new episode drops. To get the resources shared on today's podcast and the show notes, make sure to go to autismandblack.org/podcast. And be sure to share your takeaways from the show on IG stories and Twitter using our official hashtag AIBpod so that we can find them and share them. And if you want to continue the conversation from today's episode, make sure to join our Autism in Black podcast Facebook community. And please make sure to answer the questions to gain entry. Thank you for listening and joining me this week. Have a good one.